And today our guest is a long-time friend of mine. I've known Nancie McDermott for, gosh, years.
Decades.
Several food events that occur over the years there. Usually I always see you at the IECP conference there, which is coming up in May, and it's in Santa Fe.
Santa Fe.
You're going?
Yes. I'm not sure. May is not the best time. It's like I like that February, March, but fingers crossed.
Well, the book today is fruit. It's Nancie's Southern twist on the big fruits in that area there. Some are in season, some of them are not. So she's going to be talking about both of them and what makes them so special. Today, the chef team has put together a menu because when Chef Tom looked at this book, he's like, are we going to do like all desserts and fruit salads and stuff like that?
No.
So there are a couple recipes that you'll be able to retrieve, like the Jasmine Rice there. And what was the other one? The cream. Yeah, and was there one more? The salad's from the book. That's from the book. The Jasmine. Okay, then those are, I guess, those are the other two. To make it more balanced and whatnot. Actually, the main, which is a shrimp dish, is actually in the book as well. And so that's how we put it all together today. Okay, so you guys know the deal, or most of you know the deal. The formal presentation will start at 12, FaceTime Live there. But I'm going to turn you over to Nancie, and she's going to explain today's menu, including the drinks over there, too.
Yes.
Okay? Nancie, take it away.
All right. Thank you all so much. Wow. I've known about Melissa's for years and years and years, from getting my culinary career really started when I moved to Southern California in 1985, right after I got married, and I had been in New York City. I joined the Peace Corps right out of college, went to Thailand, taught English as a second language in junior high, found that I really liked junior high age kids and teaching, and came back and did that in North Carolina, which is my home base, for about 5 years. It was kind of quiet, and so I started thinking I want to do something else, and I decided to move to New York City, where I had buddies who they'd done the hard work for the past 6 or 8 years, so I could move into a great apartment, get a room. I didn't move to New York in a hard way. I moved an easy way and just started eating and cooking. I taught school for about 4 more years, but I was getting interested in food as a business and food as work. I always loved to cook. I always loved to eat. I mean, I love to eat. I remember a scary amount of things from when I was like 5 and 6 and 7. And I loved to cook as soon as I could, reach the stove, that old thing. And I started getting interested, worked for a wholesale caterer, and started getting interested in catering. So I thought I was going to be a caterer. In New York, you can kind of do that on the side, get little small jobs. When we got married and moved to Southern California, I realized it's like you have to have a commissary. You need to know what it's like, if you know me, it's so not, the details of that job are not me. And around that time, I started teaching some cooking classes, and I took a food writing class from Janice Wald Henderson, who's a food and travel writer. She was based in Los Angeles, and this put me in, it was a UCLA extension course, and it was food writing. She had the editors of both the LA Times and the LA Herald Examiner. She had the big restaurant critic. She had a Barbara Fairchild from Bon Appetit magazine. She had Diane Ross and Worthington talk about cookbooks, and each person talked about what they did. And they didn't talk about how to do it, but just this world of food writing, and I really glommed onto that because I love the research. I'm a detective. I like the homework. I'll tell you, the thing about me is that I pretty much only like to look right now, and I like to look back. I don't think of, oh, this is great. I think of some interesting new thing to do with an ingredient. I like to say, what is this thing? How do people use it in the South or in Morocco? Or how do people use it on holidays? What is this involved in religious ceremonies? What are the seasons, the science? I love all those aspects. So I got onto food writing, and it was also a great time to teach cooking classes. So I taught cooking classes, wrote for newspapers. You could freelance for newspaper food sections. There were so many of them at that time. Got into magazines, and finally started writing cookbooks. And this is my 14th cookbook. I really like that gig. I like it. My friend Jill and I were talking this morning about the big project, and to think of it, to dive deep, to make a big mess, and then put it all back together in a coherent thing. And I often get the question, cookbooks, does anybody buy cookbooks anymore? I just go online and I just Google for the recipe, and it's like, I do too. There's a time, if you want to make chocolate chip cookies tonight for something, I'm not going to go look for my chocolate chip cookie book. It's perfectly fine to do that. But just as I like to watch TV, I like to go to the movies, I like live plays, and I like to listen to the radio. So there's room for all kinds of expressions. And a cookbook is a particular place to put a whole lot of the information that you may want into one place. And I love to do cookbooks. I love, the best thing you can tell me is, well, buying it is really nice. If you bought it, yay. We're happy to give you one today. But also that I get emails from people saying, I made your recipe for X, and everybody loved it. Sometimes they say, and it didn't fix, why is it still soup? But also, we loved it. We served it for such and such, and everybody was so happy. And it's like, man, I got to be at that party. That means the world to me. So the work that y'all are doing is about cooking and sharing knowledge and bringing people together, and I just feel like we're the luckiest folks in the world. People say, your job is so much fun, and it's like, yes, choose a job that is fun. So this book was a little different from ones that I've done before. I did Southern cakes, I did Southern pies, I did quick and easy Thai, I did a curry book. But this one it's a series called Savor the South that UNC Press, I live in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, has done. There are about 24 volumes, and they're mostly single subject. There's okra, there's bourbon, there's pecans, there's corn, there's sweet potatoes. And I was talking to them about it. I said, can I do rice? They said, that's not. I said, what about coconut? They said, And then they said, we've got it for you. We want you to do persimmons, especially the wild persimmon. The picture on the cover is a wild persimmon. They grow all over the U.S., but they're particularly beloved in the American South and then somewhat in the Midwest. Persimmons, scuppernong and muscadine grapes, and I'll come back and talk about these, and figs. And I said, I can do that. And I said, but I think we really need to have blackberries in there because they're one. And they said, oh, okay. And so now the title is starting to become unwieldy. And I said, and what about pawpaws and mayhaws? And what about, watermelon, my gosh, strawberries? And they said, okay, it's going to be Southern fruit. The last thing we put in was peaches. You'd think that was obvious, but they already had a book on peaches. And then they said, but wait, if we have a book that says Southern fruit that doesn't have peaches, we'll have no credibility. So even peaches got their chapter. There's 12 fruits in there. I didn't plan it this way, but 6 of them are familiar, peaches and blackberries, and you already know a lot about them, and 6 are less familiar, the mayhaws, pawpaws, scuppernong, and muscadines. And 6 of them are wild, and 6 of them are cultivated. So it was so much fun. I had to stop myself. About 5 recipes for each fruit, although there were only 3 for mayhaws, because that's, I'll tell you why. And persimmons, they had to cut me off. I think there might be 7 persimmon recipes in there because that wild fruit is particularly close to my heart. So it was so much fun to do a little essay about it, some background, how it's used. But I'm so glad it's not a Southern cookbook. It is not, this is not a traditional Southern dish. I tried to get a few greatest hits of a classic thing, like there's a fig, Ocracoke Island fig pound cake with a buttermilk glaze that is a classic North Carolina, particular to a particular place. It's an island and people make this. And then other things that I would say, what would be something good that you can do with mayhaw jelly besides put it on a biscuit? You could use it as a glaze with meatballs and so forth. And we also I didn't want it to be all sweets. So there's certainly a lot more cakes and pies and sweets in the book than there are savory dishes, but there are some, and especially there's things with lamb and the chicken with scuppernong grapes. So it's meant for study. It's sort of a gifty size, but it's also meant for cooking, and it's also meant for getting people curious and getting people interested. There are no photographs, but we live in the magic time of the Google, and so you put in mayhaws and images, and there you are. Here's a close-up. Here's a distance. Here's a picture of people in the little boat rowing along under the trees, shaking the trees together, the mayhaws in that. And I'll come back to that when we're doing that dish. But I had so much fun doing it, as I do with all my books, and I'm just really thrilled to share it with you today. And let me tell you what you're going to be eating. Starting over here, we've got 2 beverages. This one is, I think it's my favorite in terms of timeliness, because we're seeing a lot. There's a book of the Book of Scraps, and we're talking about what did we waste, what did we throw away. Can you eat beet greens? Do sweet potatoes have greens? Of course they do. And large portions of the world, in Western Africa, they wouldn't throw those sweet potato greens out. That's something that you can eat, something that you can do. In Thailand, they don't wait for the papayas to become ripe and perfect for for 20 minutes. They take the unripe papaya and treat it as a vegetable and chop it up and season it and flavor it. Same with mangoes. It's like, what can't you do with it? So I love that attitude and not wasting things. So this is horchata de melon. It's made from cantaloupe. So cantaloupe has its own chapter. And by the way, cantaloupe is a melon, and watermelon technically isn't. Cantaloupe is in the muskmelon family. That's a proper melon. It's not all muskmelons are netted, but it is a netted design. Watermelons are of the family of cucumbers, which I kind of got a hint of when I was in Thailand, because the name for watermelon is Theng Mo, and the name for cucumber is Theng Qua. And it's like, oh, those two are related. And if you think about how they look, winter melon, but it has the name watermelon because this thing looks like that. Don't you love going to the market and say, this is Vietnamese mint, and this is, Chinese coriander, and it's like, we could just use the name. If the only reference is this is an herb and so is basil, maybe we shouldn't be calling it a basil. But people, it's the human story. It's what is it called? This is another thing with writing about food, to say this is called X. One thing that I try to do when I write about Asian food is to look for all the different names that things are called. And one big service you can do is say, okay, it's called, I can't think of an example now. But if you look in a Malaysian cookbook and a Thai cookbook and one that's oriented toward that, and they'll call wild limes, they'll call them different names. You could say, you might also find this labeled this and this and this, and just list all those names as part of a head note. Because when people go to the Asian market, they may not see a sign that says, this is holy basil. It may be written in Thai, or it may be just called basil. So gathering information and putting it together is something I think that's really powerful that we can do along with the recipe. Okay, so back to cantaloupe. This is horchata. I thought horchata meant rice ground up with water and sugar and cinnamon, the rice-based horchata that you can get at many Latin places. Horchata is wider than that. It has the meaning of beverage, and this is made from the seeds of a cantaloupe. So you cut open a cantaloupe, scoop out the seeds and all the goo that comes with it, put that in a blender and grind it up really, really finely, and then mix that with sugar and water and strain out the seeds, and you've got a nutty, delicious drink. And you have just used the stuff that you would have thrown away because it's all gooey, but it's covered with delicious stuff. If it were a savory thing, we would certainly use it in a soup. But that was one of my favorites to come across. So we had that, we've got that. It's easy thing to make for a party. And this one is strawberry shrub. I'm gonna make that for you. So I'm gonna talk about excuse me, I need to drink water. I'll talk about strawberry shrub when I'm doing the demonstration. This one, Thailand, not big on baking. In Asia, it's not, people don't have ovens. There's butter, certainly sugar, butter and chocolate and vanilla and some of the goodies of baking and having an oven, and that British heritage and European heritage of baking is not part of it. So desserts, the way that we know them, where you would have a big piece of pie with ice cream on it, or a special cake with icing, that's not part of most Asian cuisines. And the most wonderful dessert that I remember having in Thailand was on a very hot day. We went to a restaurant to have khao man gai, which is rice with chicken with oily rice, and it's Hainan chicken and rice. It's beloved, Vietnam, China, all through Southeast Asia. It's a dish that you see everywhere. The dish does not change. The sauces change. You take a whole chicken, you cook it until it's tender, not cooking it too hard. Take it out, cook rice using the oily broth. Serve some of the broth on the side. You've got this rich rice, and to say something that is rich or fatty or oily in Asian context is like, oh, yum, that's delicious. There's not this, oh my God, it needs to be low fat or something. It's like that was a form of deliciousness. It was a way of not wasting food. So Hainan chicken and rice at a place that's all they made. We sat outside, and then we were finished. They brought a big platter, and half of it was fresh cut pineapple, and half of it was fresh cut watermelon, and it was covered with shaved ice. So it was super hot outside, and the fruit was super cold. And it was just the most perfect dessert. It didn't overwhelm the meal. It was just a perfect, bright ending. So for this book, I thought, with watermelon, I want to think of something simple that you can do with not cooking, but just mint and those flavors. It's just an easy thing that you can always have out. And we don't need to think of it as a dessert. It can be thought of as a as a beautiful salad that could just be out with a whole meal. This is persimmons, fresh persimmons with arugula and just a lime juice dressing and shards of Parmesan cheese. What could be wrong? You could use another dry cheese grating. But persimmons are, you know, thank you, Melissa's. They're out there much more than they were before. I think a lot of people in where I am in North Carolina, you can find them in the grocery store. You can certainly find multiple types of them in Asian markets. And people don't know what to do with them. So I've posted a lot on my blog about persimmons because we know them in North Carolina because of a wild variety that is very seasonal that people it kind of went away. People used to gather it, and then we're building all these houses and cutting down these trees that are on the edge of the forest. So it's underknown now. But now that we can get these, it's something that I really love sharing. So that's a simple salad, and you know, it's easy to mush it up and use it as you would in baking. But just start buying them, eating them out of hand. These usually don't have, this is called a fuyu. It looks like a tomato. And sometimes they'll have seeds, mostly they don't even have seeds. Just start using them and sharing them. The rice, I will make sure that we post the recipe for the jasmine rice. This is not in the book, but it's jasmine rice and just tossed with herbs and a little bit of seasoning. Because we made the shrimp with mayhaw jelly, it's got a lot of sauce. I don't want to serve you something that's supposed to go with rice without the rice. But this would also be wonderful with couscous. It'd be wonderful with barley, with quinoa, with any kind of just something to get all that sauce. And finally, the Blackberry Roll. Again, I'm going to make that for you, so I want to talk about that in detail when we're after you've had a chance to eat it and not while I'm cooking. So I think that gives you an idea of what we've got food-wise. I'd love to sign your book, and I'm looking forward to talking with you, answering questions at the end. I'm so thrilled that you're here, and yay fruit, yay Melissa's.
Thank you. Okay.